Hey everyone, my name is Wedge and welcome to the Manosaurus Tournament Report. Born of the Gods just came out and you know what that means. A load of new cards finding their way into decks. Granted, Born of the Gods is a small set unlike our last winter set Gatecrash, and the decks on the list are similar archetypes just in a different order. Still, that's not to say we don't have new cards jumping into the format. Also keep in mind, as weeks pass and when Born of the Gods gets released online, we're bound to see more innovative decks that just took a little more tuning. With all that said, since a lot of these decks are, on a general level, archetypes we've seen before, we're going to be focusing on the new cards in the top 16 decks and how they're being used. Starting from the top, in first place we had Eric Gray's Blue Devotion, with another Blue Devotion deck in 7th place. Disappointingly, not a single Born of the Gods card made either list, though fortunately this is the only deck where that was the case. Considering the on-again, off-again popularity of Dissolve in the deck, we were hoping to see some experimentation with new counters like Thassa's Rebuff. Given the 4-of and creature-heavy nature of the deck, Mind Reaver might even make sense on sideboard, but alas, there were no such cards to be found. The 7th place deck did, however, get there without Jace in the main deck, instead opting to double down on both Domestication and Cyclonic Rift. This at least means that players are starting to consider opening space in the deck for other potential strategies. In 2nd place, we had Kent Ketter and his Green-Red Monsters deck, but that's not all. Green-Red Monsters also took 10th, 12th, 13th, and 15th place, more than double the number of places any other deck took in top 16. The biggest addition to Kent's deck is a full set of Courser of Kruphix. Now what the Courser is not is mana acceleration. While it lets you play lands off the top, you're still restricted to 1 per turn. However, that still helps you avoid flooding out, and the life boost gives you a nice safety net against aggressive decks, of which there are many. A 1-of Xenaghost, God of Revels, made main deck alongside a pair of his Planeswalker Self. In a deck that already runs a 4-of Massive Red Flyer and a 4-of that pumps a creature's power by 4 and gives it trample, power doubling hits hard in this deck. Not to mention, an indestructible 6/5 is nothing to scoff at. We're also seeing Unravel the Aether on sideboards pretty much across the board, which makes sense seeing that it's a naturalized effect that also hits gods, like the aforementioned new Xenaghost. A couple of other green-red decks also added Fanatic of Xenaghost, another sound choice. You're either getting a 3/3 for 3 that swings this turn, or a 4/4 for 3 that swings next turn, and either way it has trample. Seems like good value to me. In 3rd and 6th places, we saw Black-White Midrange continue its rise to prominence. However, it's light on new cards, instead playing at overlooked card choices, particularly in the case of 6th place deck, which ran Alm's Beast, Nightveil Spectre, and some blue mana. Bioblight is the only new card to see main deck play here. Still, a card that can single-handedly take down every copy of almost anything in Blue Devotion, or cut an army of pack rats down to manageable size at instant speed makes its case pretty clearly. While it isn't technically a new card, Revoke Existence also saw some sideboard play here, which makes sense. A plane full of indestructible enchantment gods, some of which are even playable, was bound to give some action to an enchantment exiling spell just off a few years break from standard. Next up, we had the control variations. Blue-White-Red control took 4th, with 2 Blue-White control decks in 9th place and 11th place. But it was pretty reasonable to expect we'd see Blue-White variations here, given the addition of Temple of Enlightenment. Every deck that had the option ran a full set of these, and why wouldn't they? Even before Born of the Gods, pure blue-white was running partially off-color temples just to get the free draw manipulation. Fated Retribution saw more appearances here than we honestly expected as a main deck singleton in blue-white-red and on the sideboard in one of the blue-white decks. It's definitely expensive for a sweeper, but it hits Planeswalkers, which a lot of aggressive decks are using now, and it's instant. The Scry, if you drop it on your turn, is a nice added bonus. Surprisingly, we also saw Brima's King of Oreskos as a 3-of on a couple sideboards. We expected he'd mostly be used in aggressive decks, but here he applies early pressure in the mirror match where sweepers are likely to be boarded out. In 5th place, we had the only Black Devotion deck to make top 16 at the Open. This one looked much like earlier builds of the archetype with only 2 pack rats and an Erebos and his whip in the main deck. Much like with the black-white mid-range decks, BioBlight makes the main deck here because it's just too good not to use. Drown in Sorrow was a 3-of on sideboard. After all, so many of the format's small creatures are X2, just shy of having enough toughness to fall to the across-the-table -2/-2. Also, keep in mind that everything in Black Devotion can survive the same hit, unless you're lacking rats, in which case you might lose a pack rat. Green-white aggro took 8th and 16th, which is to be expected given the addition of certain new cards, like, I don't know, Bream is, to the already strong suite of aggressive cards in those colors. As we might have implied there, Bream King of Oresco saw play in both green-white decks as a 2-of addition to the main deck. Having at least 4 power on the attack and as much power blocking every turn, even if the blockers don't tend to accumulate, is too good an offer to pass up. Unsurprisingly, Temple of Plenty also made its way into the deck in groups of 3 or 4. While an aggressive deck might suffer a bit more from the lack of fast mana, the ability to scry for free can be worth it when your curve is as sensitive as an aggressive deck's is. Finally, in 14th place, we had Green-Black Devotion. In spite of its unfamiliar name, the deck is basically Green Devotion, splashing black for 2 each of Abrupt Decay and Whip of Erebos, but it also makes some surprising inclusions out of new cards. Nessian Demoloch is the first card here that we didn't expect to see on the list. A vanilla 3/3 for 5 in a mono green deck doesn't look like a good deal on paper, but the fact that your opponent has to choose between making it a 6/6 or letting something like a land or possibly a planeswalker die makes the card quite a bit more appealing. The other unexpected tribute card is Nessian Wild's Ravager, also known as the Hydra that lent its ugly mugs to the face of the Hydra encounter deck. While the idea of probably losing a creature to your opponent's new 6/6 isn't exactly desirable, it may be a better choice than staring down a 12/12 in a deck that could give it Trample or Lifelink. That's how the Ravager fits in. And that about wraps up our look at our first post Born of the Gods top 16. Some of the new cards here we saw coming, but others really took us by surprise. In either case, we expect to see at least a few other new cards find their place in the weeks to come. Next week, there's a Star City Open in Somerset, New Jersey. We'll be back with the top 16 from that. As always, subscribe below for the latest and most reliable Magic the Gathering information you could ever need. This is the Mana Source. I'm Wedge. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.